Nature provides the elements that make life possible on our planet. The environment of Earth presents conditions that allow for the existence of the human race and for the presence of all other forms of life. The discovery of agriculture ensured the presence of mankind on Earth. It enabled us to plant seeds to obtain food, one of our most basic needs. This intimate relationship permitted the evolution of civilization as we know it today. Human ingenuity led to the mastering of sophisticated technology. We can now manufacture complex machines and feed masses of people in urban centers, populations that no longer have to work the land. And we have established economic systems to facilitate this new way of life. But we have also learned that a great number of natural resources are limited and that the process of modernization is inflicting considerable changes on the environment of Earth, changes that may severely hurt the lives of our children, or worse, changes that may lead to our own extinction. In East Java, Indonesia, Mount Kalut has made this land extremely fertile by depositing minerals in the soil. Although we now have a better understanding of the environment and can use to our own advantage the natural resources around us, we cannot control nature itself. Every 15 years or so, Mount Kalut becomes a fierce volcano and sends down these canals a mass of lava, bringing about death and destruction. The avalanche clogs the rivers and provokes floods during the rainy season. The eruptions are short and last only a few hours, but the aftermath of the disaster is felt for many years. Natural disasters, uncontrollable events that have profound implications on the economic life of the countries they affect. Droughts, volcanoes, earthquakes, floods devastate many regions of the Third World, leaving behind a trail of death and poverty. Not too long ago, an entire town was buried here in Colombia when Nevado del Ruiz erupted. This used to be the town of Armero, a center of commerce. Now, it is only a sad evidence of the disaster. Deserted, lifeless. The volcano sent down the mountain a torrent of mud, stones, and debris, killing more than 22,000 people, destroying everything in its path. Antonio Arias is a survivor of the catastrophe.
Pues y además comenzó, mi hermano Edison comenzó a gritar, ¿sí? Toda la gente que estaba en la loma comenzaron a bajar y colocaron latas y todos llegaron hasta acá. Y ahí como hasta las 6 de la mañana sacaron a mi mamá. Lo del lodo fue que se comenzó a oír el traquido, ¿sí? Detumbando palos, piedras, porque eso traía una magnitud muy grande, ¿sí? Y comenzó a traquear y se oía una cosa muy infernal.
It would be unfair to blame all natural disasters on the actions of mankind upon the environment. But in the scientific age in which we live, we know that humans are not only the victims of natural catastrophes. We know that our manipulation of the environment exacerbates floods, fires, droughts, disease, and famine. Studies and observations indicate that the accumulation of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere resulting from the burning of forests and fossil fuels that power automobiles and machines is warming up the overall climate of Earth and may prompt the so-called greenhouse effect. If the present trend continues and the heat-absorbing capacity of deep oceans is saturated, an uncontrollable rise in temperature may take place within a few decades. This could mean total chaos, particularly if we think that the higher temperatures could melt the polar caps of our planet. However, the days when change could be rejected have long passed. The poorer nations need to expedite their growth in order to meet the needs of their populations. But development need not necessarily work against the environment, and there is much to be learned from ancient ways. Salt farming is one of Thailand's oldest trades, passed down from one generation to the next. This is the way in which nearly all of Thailand's salt is produced, in a balanced relationship between human labor and nature. These ponds are used to store seawater brought several miles inland from the Gulf of Thailand. An ingenious system of windmills draws the water into the ponds without the use of fuel-powered engines. The water evaporates under the heat of the sun, and the salt then crystallizes into a solid form. The salt farms provide employment for hundreds of people in the area, and the economic life of the region depends on it in the same manner as the economies of entire nations depend on their natural resources. Economic growth is closely linked to the environment. Some countries depend heavily on a single commodity, and the functioning of their economic systems is inextricably tied to that one resource. Such is the case of bauxite in Jamaica, copper in Zaire, or tin in Bolivia. Price fluctuations of those commodities affect their foreign exchange earnings and can bring their economies to a total collapse. Here in Bolivia, lower tin prices are making a severe dent on the already troubled economy. Extracting minerals from the Andes Mountains has always been an important activity in this region and has had economic repercussions since colonial days.
Well, I think anyone who looks at the question of environment and development can't help but be struck by the huge impact, not only in the 20th century, but actually since the beginning of human civilization, of human activities on the surrounding environment, and how these activities have finally resulted in a situation where the resource base which supports human civilizations has been undermined.
Mesopotamia was once the breadbasket of the known world, and there are biblical references of lush agricultural lands in that area. These soils salted up before the age of Christ and are now deserts. Huge parts of northern Africa are known to have been forested at the time of the Roman Empire. Now, those lands are also deserts. We must learn from past mistakes that have caused negative ecological changes,
particularly now that we are equipped to accelerate those changes with the help of advanced technology.
We can change the environment and mold it to our own convenience. Divert the course of rivers and build dams for irrigation. Clear the land for agriculture. Carve tunnels on the mountains to extract the minerals. But this relationship between mankind and Earth is a delicate one. Whatever we do to the environment, nature will do something in return. And if we are not careful, we may spoil the air, the earth, the water, inflict irreparable damage on the basic elements that sustain life on Earth.
As there has been a growing consciousness of the interrelatedness between environmental considerations and economic development, more and more attention has been focused on certain kinds of development activities in the third world that are really resulting in long-term environmental damage. Damage that first isn't apparent, but which in the middle to long term undermines indeed the economic success and viability of projects.
There have been many development projects that have been misguided. Past mistakes that have caused more harm than good to the populations they aim to help. These projects may have been well-intentioned, but did not consider the environmental implications appropriately when they were designed. Economic planners must learn from these mistakes.
These are development activities which are whose adverse environmental impacts are becoming increasingly more apparent. And I think in the future, both developing countries and development agencies are going to be focusing both on means to mitigate the impacts of such adverse activities and to promote development which is less environmentally destructive.
In a world in which food demand is estimated to double by the year 2000, some 15 million acres of land, an area about the size of West Virginia, are lost for food production every year due to the loss of fertility or soil erosion. But the pressures on the land are many. Overgrazing, the intensification of agriculture, and the increase of human population add to the problems.
By the year 2000, it is estimated that we will have 6 to 6.5 billion people on this planet, all carrying out their own form of human activity. This human activity, whatever form it takes, can be classified as development. The development process, in whatever form it takes, means the manipulation of the environment, the exploitation of natural resources, and impact the consequences for our life-supporting ecological systems. But economic growth and development must go forward because people as human beings have hopes and aspirations for a better quality of life for themselves, for their children, and for their grandchildren. The challenge we face is to how to channel, how to plan, how to conduct economic development in ways that are maximally protective of the environment, of those life-supporting ecological systems, and protecting of those resources that we're going to need continuously because they support all national economies.
Development is desperately needed in societies where the majority of the population barely makes enough to survive from one day to the next. Countries where basic human needs are not met. Countries where the average per capita income may be less than $100 a year.
In the third world, poverty is perhaps the worst enemy that the environment has. It is very difficult for developing nations to sacrifice the pressing needs of their populations in exchange for purely environmental concerns. We are talking about countries that are overburdened with external debt, unemployment, and hunger.
Poverty is also perpetuated by climatic conditions. Many development projects seldom consider the relationship that exists between a country's economic performance and its climate, and this must be taken into account. In the tropics, rainfall tends to be either too much or too little for crop production. The amount of rain makes the difference between a good or a bad harvest, a determinant factor for these predominantly agricultural economies.
It is not coincidental that some of the poorest countries in the world are located in the tropical belt. Their climate, so harsh for men, agriculture, and livestock, is ideal for bacteria and disease-carrying parasites.
Viruses, microbes, and all kinds of pests attack people, their animals, and their crops. It is difficult to work in these regions. Hot and humid climates reduce the efficiency of people. Disease is rampant. As a result, productivity is lower. Manual laborers need more frequent and longer rest pauses than workers in cooler climates, who are normally healthier. The equipment designed for temperate zones breaks down easily. New appropriate technology must be found for this type of environment. It is hard to break the ground and plant the seeds in the dry soils of the tropics, and farmers must depend on rains that may or may not come. In these regions south of the Sahara Desert, droughts strike with alarming regularity, killing hundreds of thousands of people, decimating their livestock, destroying their crops and soils.
Sahel, an Arabic word for coast or border. It is also used in connection with several sub-Saharan countries where drought is an ever-present threat. Halfway across the world, unexpected storms may hit the Bay of Bengal, destroying crops and villages. Such are the extremes of tropical climate.
There is a terrible quandary or dilemma in many developing countries now where, in a sense, people are forced by short-term needs for fuel wood, for subsistence farming, to destroy the resource base on which their subsistence and on which their long-term welfare depends. And that's a particularly tragic situation which one can see in parts of Africa and the Sahel, in Himalayan hill areas where a fuel wood shortage is forcing people to deforest still more the Himalayan foothills, and that of course results in flooding and in subsequent rainy seasons. This is a terrible dilemma, and I think this is one area where one can safely say that the one of the greatest pressures on causing environmental destruction is poverty.
The Amazon jungle, the world's largest forest. This is one of the few areas of the world still largely untouched by modern civilization. Its dense rainforest spreads across 8 South American nations and covers an area about the size of the United States west of the Mississippi. The Amazon is home to unique species of plants and animals found nowhere else in the world, it is also home to tribal communities that have not yet made contact with the outside world. But this virgin environment is also changing. Every year, more and more of the Amazon jungle is destroyed by fires directed to expand agricultural frontiers.
And we know that there is a large amount of tropical forest deforestation going on in that region, particularly as a result of landless people, landless peasants seeking a better life, moving into these areas and cutting and burning and growing crops for a few years, then finding the soil has deteriorated and having to move on and do the same process all over again.
A vinda dos colonos para a Amazônia é uma realidade. Nós temos que encará-la de perto, trabalhando junto com esses colonos, no sentido de educá-los para ocupar o espaço ambiental ou o meio ambiente dentro da Amazônia. Eu estou consciente de que se nós trabalharmos em conjunto, nós poderemos minimizar em muito o impacto ambiental na Amazônia com esses assentamentos.
But additionally, there are large entrepreneurs that are moving into these areas and cutting down large areas of the tropical forest and trying to turn them into rangeland, trying to turn them into pasture to support cattle production.
Boa, na hora que for derrubar o pão. Aí.
A gente pode ser muito bem objetivo. Uma árvore dessa leva uns 80 anos para chegar à altura que ela teria hoje. E nós, em 10 minutos, conseguimos derrubá-la. Então isso reflete um desequilíbrio no planejamento da ocupação da floresta.
The indiscriminate cutting of rainforest areas in the world without proper understanding of the impact that this is going to have on the ecosystem of the area should stop. Otherwise, we may be converting what now are lush jungle areas into deserts, barren lands that perhaps will not be able to support human life in the future. Tropical forests can only be fertile as long as they are forested. Most of their soils are fragile, and once the trees are cut down, the rain will wash away the nutrients, causing erosion.
We know, both from our observations and from our studies, that many parts of the Amazon, many parts of the tropical forests of the Amazonas region are not suited to this type of development. I think now that we're finding that the authorities in Brazil are becoming more conscious, are becoming more aware, are more understanding of the relationships between the development that has been going on and what is happening to their natural resources and how it's going to affect their future and their people.
In the state of Rondônia, 30% of the jungle has been demarcated for the preservation of forest, wildlife, and tribal communities. This type of effort should be encouraged and replicated only if the demarcated boundaries are continuously guarded.
looking at the Industrial Revolution, the industrialized countries, of course, are no model for a sustainable management of the environment. You can look at Western Europe today, or now increasingly North America, the whole situation with the dying of the great forests through air pollution, acid rain, and other causes. So certainly there's a rather discouraging human record of mismanagement of the environment, and the third world and the developing countries perhaps don't need to be lectured by any other nations on how to manage their environments. I think the main point is to avoid the mistakes of the past.
With only about 20% of the world's population, the developed nations hold the majority of the industrial power, and their contribution to the environmental problems is enormous. Despite measures to protect the environment, they are still the major source of water and air pollution, as well as nuclear waste. The United States alone, for example, is responsible for about 24% of the yearly emission of carbon dioxide.
The protection of our environment must increase. On the one hand, developing countries are forced to overexploit their resources because of the poverty in which they live. On the other, the industrialized countries cause considerable damage to the environment. Development and environmental protection must go hand in hand. In many parts of the world, this is starting to be understood. There are costs involved, but we must invest in sustainable development. There is only one Earth. If we ruin its environment, there is no future for the human race.